Welcome to another Adventures with Bill, and today we're going to be doing driveway vehicle repairs. We're going to be replacing a front wheel bearing on a 2004 Dodge Ram 1500 four-wheel drive. And you can see in the picture of the wheel, right where the red arrow is, that's where the wheel bearing is, behind that. As I was driving home yesterday, made a left-hand turn, heard a very bad grinding sound, and I knew it was the wheel bearing. So I used my laser thermometer to take a reading on all four wheels, and the right front wheel was about 60 degrees hotter than all the other wheels, and so that let me know which bearing it was. Again, this is a 2004 Dodge Ram 1500, and one thing I always do when I buy a used vehicle is I get the repair manual. It does a good job of walking you through the steps. Now, in this particular case, the manual says that you need to remove the front drive shaft, and that's not true. You don't have to do that. You can do this with it still in place, and so that's what I'm going to show you. For tools, of course, you'll need a jack stands, heavy-duty jack stands, and a good jack, a way to get the vehicle up in the air. This is really important because you're going to be under the vehicle at times, and you've got to be safe. You don't want the vehicle falling on you. I mostly used regular hand tools, but I did have an impact wrench. That speeds up the process sometimes. And here is a can of penetrant, rust remover penetrant. You're going to need that. And this PB blaster is the best that I've ever found. We will use it on the main axle nut as well as some other parts that are rusted together. Here you can see I've got the jacks and the jack stands laid out. Time to get the vehicle up in the air. Now, I'm 66 years old. I'm doing this in my driveway. It's 91 degrees outside today, but if you've got pretty good mechanical skills and a decent set of tools, this is a job you can do for yourself. Here we've got the vehicle up in the air, securely on jack stands, and I'm going to wiggle the front wheel so you can actually hear the slop in the bearings, how it's loose, so it's definitely not safe to drive, needs replacing. So the first thing is to get the wheel off. Use an impact wrench to get the lug nuts off. Get the wheel and tire out of the way so we can get to what needs replacing. Got to take the brake caliper off first. There's an upper and lower bolt. Use the impact wrench to get those out. They come out pretty easy. You'll want to have a piece of wire handy to hold the brake caliper up out of the way while you're working. You don't want it hanging from the brake hose. It can actually break it. Next thing, this is where the penetrating fluid comes in. You got to take that big axle nut off, and so I loosened it up with the penetrating fluid, put the impact wrench on it, and amazingly, it came off. Sometimes those are really tight. Now this is the shaft, the drive shaft coming through, and it's got to be loosened. I'm hitting it with a brass punch just to move it back out of the way to loosen it. Now the brake rotor itself is like rusted in place, so penetrating fluid, nice big hammer, and carefully tapping on that rotor until it pops loose. And there it goes. 3 bolts that hold the wheel bearing hub assembly in place, and to get to those in the back, you can see here it's really tight, and you need to push the axle back into the hub so that you can get a socket on those. So I had that clamp to push it in, and then they're long bolts, and these were pretty tough. Once the bolts are off, now the hub assembly is bare, just kind of like rusted in place. So big hammer, chisel, and it finally comes off. There's the old assembly, and it's all corroded. I'm putting never sees on the bolts before I put them back in. Also have to scrape the corrosion off where the new hub is going to go in. So I just take a sharp knife and scrape the corrosion off, and the new hub's ready to be installed. So I put the mounting bolts protruding out through the front just to hold this dust cover in place while I get ready to put the new, there it is, the shiny new wheel bearing hub assembly in place. Got to slide it, align the splines on the drive shaft, get it in place, and start those bolts in from the back, and they go in a lot easier than they came out. Once you got all three of those, you tighten them up, make sure that thing's not going to come off. Now the nut goes back on, and so I'll put it on with the impact and finish it up by hand. So to finish it, torquing it by hand, you have to have, you see me putting that black bar in between the lugs to hold it in place, and whoops, well, that didn't quite hold it in place. So learned my lesson. I've got it now on the creeper seat until I can torque that as tight as it needed to be, and the assembly of the wheel bearing is finished. The rotor goes back on, and a tip to hold the rotor in place while you put the brake caliper assembly back on is to take one of the lug nuts and put it on the bottom, and that holds it securely in place so it's not bouncing around, sliding on you while you put the brake caliper back on. So I'm unhooking the brake caliper from the support wire that I put on there, and mounting it back in place with the two main bolts, top and bottom. Now I'm taking the bolts out, the smaller bolts out, to get the caliper out just to replace the brake pads. And that comes up out of the way. You can just rest it up on top so it doesn't fall off, and then just simply slide the two brake pads out, one to the outside. That one's in pretty good shape, but the inside one, as it comes off, it only had about 1/8 of an inch of material left. That's why I'm putting new brake pads on. So installation, there you can see the new one, how much thicker it is than the old one. Should last me several years. You simply just slide them back into the upper and lower tabs the way the old ones came off. And slides on pretty easy. Inside one, then the outside one in the same way. Up against the rotor. Again, the rotor is being held in place by that one lug nut I put on. Now, the pistons have come out since the pads are worn, and you got to squeeze them in to get them over the new full thickness pads. A lot of people will use a C-clamp. I just use a little pair of channel locks here, big pair of channel locks, and you'll have to go back and forth to one to the other, because as you push one in, you can see it pushes the other one out. But you just keep doing that back and forth, and you get it to where it slides in place. You also have the two sleeves for the mounting bolts. You have to push them out of the way, and just have to push that back piston in just a little bit, and now you see it goes on easy. So slip it over the brake pads, back into place. Then the two mounting bolts, tighten them up with the impact wrench, and it's pretty much done. Tip for putting the wheel back on easily. Those wheels are heavy, truck wheels. I put the one stud for the lug nut directly at the bottom, and then I orient the wheel with the hole for it directly at the bottom. So when you lift it up, you're not twisting and turning it to try to get it in place. Like I say, it's heavy, but you do that, slides on, hold it in place with your foot, get that lower lug nut started, and then all 5 of them on loosely. There's a hub that the wheel has to sit on, and it's not on yet, so I just lift it up a little with the pry bar, and then I can get all the lug nuts in place. I'm not tightening them with the impact wrench, I'm just getting them on, and I go back with the ratchet star pattern to sequentially tighten them up. And now I write myself a note, tighten the lug nuts. And where I put that note is on the steering wheel. before I finish the job so that the truck's up in the air now, but when you lower it, get it off the jack stands, you might forget that you haven't completely snugged them up, and it's not good to drive away with loose lug nuts on your wheels. Trust me on that. So we drop it down and get jack stands out of the way, final torquing of the lug nuts, and that job is done. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, ask that you would like it, hit the like button below, and also the subscribe button, and you'll know when the rest of the Adventures with Bill videos are coming out on YouTube. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Have a great day. God bless you.